Hello, I am Dr. April Grothy, and today we are talking about the 6 categories of content analysis. What is content analysis, you might ask? It is an unobtrusive technique that allows researchers to analyze relatively unstructured data in view of the meaning, symbolic qualities, and expressive contents they have and of the communicative roles they play in the lives of the data's source. That was a mouthful, I know. What does this actually mean? Content analysis is the way to scientifically analyze words, essays, conversations, and text. Why is this important, you may ask? Well, for one, we had no way to analyze these texts before. Also, this is going to be utilized throughout our entire class, so we better understand this. So our overview, what are our 6 categories? They are extrapolations, standards, indices and symptoms, linguistic representation, conversations, and institutional processes. In this presentation, I will be utilizing a sample paper to give examples of each category. The sample paper that I have chosen is called Engaging Stakeholders Through Social Networking: How Nonprofit Organizations Are Using Facebook. The purpose of this study was to examine how nonprofit organizations use Facebook to engage their stakeholders and foster relationship growth. 2 research questions were used in this content analysis of the article. Those questions are: how are nonprofit organizations incorporating relationship development strategies into their Facebook profiles, as well as does nonprofit typology influence how organizations influence their Facebook preferences? So variables were created in order to analyze more than 200 nonprofit organizations, and what those results came up with was that nonprofit organizations are not utilizing Facebook to their full potential. They are putting information out, but they are not fostering that relationship with their stakeholders. So our first category is extrapolations. In our extrapolations, we're extrapolating trends. We are looking at recurrent data to show trends. Great example, stock market. Patterns, we're extrapolating patterns either within our essay or throughout history. We are also extrapolating differences, so we're comparing variables to determine a difference, if there is a difference. In our paper, we did utilize extrapolations. There is no research, or very little research I should say, on what social networkings, building public relations in social networkings. There is quite a bit of research and discussion on building public relations with traditional websites or blogs. So we extrapolated this data from websites and blogs to social networking, and that is how we created our variables. Our next category is standards. With our standards, we are identifying what something is. Are you a male? Are you a female? This is usually an either or inference. You're usually one or the other. With a standard, we're also evaluating how good or bad something is. Was the food good? Was the food bad? There's also judgments. We all have a particular idea in our head how certain things look, taste, act, such or other, so we're judging how close that comes to our expectations. In our paper on nonprofits, we did in fact create standards. Those variables that we created, we extrapolated from traditional websites, were our standards. We looked at those variables and we compared them to the nonprofit organizations and said they either did have this standard or they did not meet this standard. Our next category is indices and symptoms. An indice is a variable that is significant because of how it is correlated with other variables. There are 5 indices in communication research. This is the presence or absence of something shows its awareness, the writer's awareness of this item. If they talk about it, they are aware of it. If they don't talk about it, they may not be aware of it. The frequency of something shows how important it is. The more you talk about something, the more important it is to you. Favorable or unfavorable characteristics show your attitude about something. If you are unfavorable, if you don't like something, you usually talk about it unfavorably. Qualifications are used to show, indicate how the strength, the intensity of the beliefs or the motivations of something. And the frequency of co-occurrences, the frequency of co-occurrences, which is two concepts, shows how the strength of their associations. So the more two concepts are talked about together, the more they are associated with each other. In our paper, we did talk about variables, but we did not compare these variables to each other. We use those variables as standards. Our next category is linguistic representation. So when you read something, you're creating an imaginary world, or you're creating conceivable world. When linguistic representation is what comes into your head, the pictures you create when you read something. In our paper, we did not actually use linguistic representation. At the same time, while I was reading this paper, what came to my mind was all of the essays and discussions that I have read on this same concept in my world, which is veterinary medicine, which is a small business aspect. In veterinary medicine, we also do not utilize Facebook well. So when I was reading this, that is what I thought of, but I didn't create an imaginary world. I just thought out and reached out to my veterinary world. Our next category is conversations. These are analyzed to understand naturally occurring speech. The analysis could involve inferences of the future, reinterpretations of past history, or what future applications can be held with this. Conversations are between two or more people actually communicating with each other via words, via spoken words. I do not believe that conversations are in fact discussion boards or text messaging or those things. In a conversation, you listen to what somebody says and respond right away. You are just flowing with the conversations. With discussion boards and text, you write it down, and then the person reads it. They then discuss, they then interpret it in their mind, they decide what they want to write. They may change their mind before they actually post it. So therefore, it is not quite direct and flowing as an actual spoken conversation is. So our paper, I do not believe, utilizes conversation. We did in fact analyze discussion boards, but again, I don't believe a discussion board is a conversation. Our last category is institutional processes. So we are analyzing an institution through its communications. In this, we can analyze them through legal, we can analyze them through their economics, we can analyze it through their political, we can analyze it through their technical structures. So we are just using their communications to analyze this one institution. In our paper, we did not use this category as we did not look at one particular institution. So let's recap here. We talked about 6 different categories. Those categories are extrapolations. We're looking at trends, patterns, and differences. Also, we're looking at standards. Standards are used to evaluate something by. Indices and symptoms. We're correlating one variable with another. Linguistic representation. We're creating that imaginary world in our mind. Conversations, we're trying to understand what is occurring in what is being said in naturally occurring speech. And lastly, institutional processes. We're analyzing an institution through their communications. So take home message here is our 6 categories. Just remember that our 6 categories are there, and that content analysis is being used to analyze words. We are scientifically analyzing words, essays, or conversations with content analysis. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope you had a very happy Easter. Is there any questions?